The following program is brought to you by the Worldwide Exemplification of Freemasonry and made possible by the research behind the building series of Uncommon Catechism for Uncommon Masonic Education, Volumes 1 through 4. The views expressed in this presentation are that of the author and do not represent any specific Grand Lodge. Before I get into the actual code, let me quickly review something that supports this code. One of the interesting things I came across in my travels is what I found on page 4 of my Jurisdictions Digest. It clearly states that by reason of its programs of education, Freemasonry is an educational organization. This statement intrigued me. As an educator, I cued into this declaration and decided to ask the question, what does Freemasonry actually teach? To answer this question, I quickly reviewed what I've been exposed to during my time as a Freemason. I wanted to know the typical offerings that constitute the majority of Masonic education. What I found was that there were 3 major categories that most jurisdictions offer. There's organizational training, organizational history, and organizational ritual training. Organizational training focuses upon the actual organization of Freemasonry within the jurisdiction of which one is a member. It reflects structural aspects of Freemasonry as an organization. This means how the Lodge and Grand Lodge function, which does what, when, where, how, and by whom, and what makes participation possible or not possible. This category includes Freemason tradition, etiquette, and law. Organizational history focuses upon the when and the where of Freemasonry involvement, how some ritual and organizational structures came into being, and why and who may or may not have been involved in Freemasonry and when. Organizational ritual training focuses upon how ritual is done correctly, when ritual is done incorrectly, what may not be done at all in ritual, and what should be done but isn't done, and sometimes how ritual is done elsewhere. Ritual is any standardized lodge activity that is scripted, choreographed, and adhered to without waiver. Ritual also provides the structure of true Masonic education that Masons must undertake to become masterful in their building efforts. I shall share more on this code soon. Upon review, it should be evident that what is overtly offered by Masonic education is intentionally designed to solely support the continuation and expansion of the organization of Freemasonry. It supports the organization of builders, but it does not provide the builders a builder's education. I share this not to discredit this educational effort in any way. I share it so that as educators, coaches know in advance that the purpose of Freemason education is to assure that the structure that Freemasonry offers does not become corrupted, lost, or changed. In this respect, this education does exactly what it sets out to accomplish. It preserves the structure and the code it supports. What is the purpose of that structure? It is to preserve the code that ritual points toward as it relates to what actually builds builders. I stress here that it is imperative that this preservation occurs so that current and future Masons shall have access to it. So with that information out on the table, I ask the question, what education furthers the education of builders? Any Mason can find the answer to this question in plain view within the code that is acted out each time a ritual degree is performed. Without any doubt whatsoever, ritual continuously points toward the education that builders need to become masterful. From the start, it points toward work that builders need to both be aware of and that they must do to assure that they become those better men. This pointing continues throughout ritual, and this becomes clearer upon further examination. Reviewing each step along the way, Masons encounter clues that are both indirect and direct. The indirect clues are too numerous to express in a short, purposeful presentation like this. For those interested in some of those indirect clues, I've expressed many of them throughout my building series work. Exploring each volume in the series reveals this consistent theme along with the overt clues that we will review in brief. I emphasize that the overt clues abound. The problem is that they hit Masons so gently that the temptation is to gloss over them without a second thought. Let's examine them more closely so that there is no doubt in your mind should you be tempted to dismiss them in the future. The entered apprentice ritual expresses precisely the work new Masons should do prior to their being passed to fellowcraft. It points out that Masons are to strengthen themselves fully. It further expresses that this is a twofold process. The first step is to unburden themselves through divestiture of both vices and superfluities. The second step is to purposefully and with great diligence build strength through the conscious practice and application of virtue. Both are required to build strength. Both support each other. Both are necessary for what is to follow if the fellowcraft work is to be effective. If you want a way to remember this, you have to look no further than the checkered pavement on which the altar and the three great lights of Masonry are placed. That checkered pavement makes up the ground floor of Wisdom's temple, whose very foundation resides upon God's teachings. That ground floor was originally Ornan's threshing floor, of which King David paid full price to secure for his aims. Once secured, he placed that very altar to offer suitable sacrifices to the Lord. For the benefit of those of you who are unfamiliar with this agricultural term, threshing floors are where wheat is separated from chaff by both threshing and winnowing. Threshing breaks the grain from the stalk. The act of winnowing, which provides suitable wind, divests that which is unimportant from that which is important, the chaff from the wheat. The first work that entered apprentices are directed to do is just that, and they are to do it upon the checkered pavement that is no less a threshing floor prior to the building of the temple than at the time in which they are performing their work. Additionally, while this work is taking place, entered apprentices are also asked to subdue their passions and circumscribe their desires within due bounds. The main theme of these actions involve two key elements. The first element is emotion. The second is morality. To deal effectively with issues involving the first theme, Masons must venture into the realm of emotions. I think that most of us men will agree that this is not a realm a majority of men feel comfortable with, or that they will readily venture into unless they believe there is no other choice. Those who do venture there must engage in activities that both improve and increase their emotional awareness. The results of these activities help them better comprehend what their passions and desires are and how to direct them appropriately. One of the most interesting side effects of these activities is that when Masons come to know themselves in this way, they gain abilities to better understand their fellow man in ways that other men who have not done this work could not even begin to imagine. This is but one of the many empowering results of this work. To deal effectively with issues involving the second theme, Masons must venture into the realm of morality. This is one of the realms where many men assume that they have already done all that is necessary, so they cease to do any further work. The true work that is involved in this realm requires honestly evaluating one's value system, as well as establishing and maintaining standards and boundaries which honor these values. The former requires an in-depth reality check involving a Mason's core values, his conclusions about how those values must be honored, and the beliefs that form and guide him as a result of those conclusions. The latter requires an understanding of personal and public limits that should be honored under all circumstances. To coach candidates on the work of entered apprentices, as specified within ritual, coaches should be prepared to discuss with the candidates what vices and superfluities are, how they differ from one another, the vices and superfluities they are aware of in their own lives, which ones they are not aware of, and the plans that each candidate has to successfully divest themselves of them. Furthermore, coaches should be prepared to discuss the virtues specified within ritual, what manifests them in one's life, which virtues that may be lacking in candidates' lives, and the plan candidates have to manifest them consistently within their lives. In addition to this work, coaches should be prepared to support the candidates they work with in both improving and increasing their emotional awareness. Moreover, they should be prepared to discuss the basis behind passions and desires, what they look and feel like, and how they must direct them appropriately under every circumstance. Additionally, coaches should be prepared to discuss each candidate's morality, the basis behind it, and how it is honored. How does a coach prepare to do all this? They must first do this work themselves. By looking back upon this work, I hope that it can be seen that the educational focus for entered apprentices entails preparing to learn. This builds strength and sets the stage for the fellowcraft work. Admittedly, it is a difficult task to start, much less finished to reasonable satisfaction, and is next to impossible to do quickly. What's more, such educational focus is not offered in or through any typical Masonic Lodge's educational or support activities. As a result, the likelihood that this work is ever focused upon by candidates is slim to none. Unfortunately, when a Mason has not done this work, he is improperly prepared to advance to the next degree. How can a coach tell if a Mason is improperly prepared to proceed beyond the entered apprentice degree? Here are some of the telltale signs that a Mason has vice and superfluity issues. He is burdened unnecessarily. These burdens negatively affect his resources, as in his overall strength, and we are not talking about his physical strength here. These burdens also prevent him from maximizing the return on his investments, no matter what direction those investments may take. Furthermore, there are signs that his burdens cause harm to both himself and others. When a Mason has virtue issues, he lacks temperance and hence doesn't limit himself appropriately when he rightfully should. Self-control is a must, but he won't show much control because he has yet to develop it fully. He lacks prudence and hence doesn't make prudent choices. Far-sighted, sensible care will not be one of his outward expressions when he makes life and business choices. He lacks fortitude and hence doesn't endure things that men who have fortitude do without question. Lacking in resilience and purposeful courage prevents the necessary staying power that brings about long-term results. He lacks justice and hence lacks a foundation necessary for dealing fairly with others or himself. His dealings with others show that situations are unfavorably tilted in his favor, no matter how he may try to involve himself. He lacks faith, and therefore he only believes in probable things which can only be proved, and he refuses to invest himself in the intangibles, the things that will be of greatest benefit and are worthy of believing in. His beliefs will be based solely upon that which is concrete, and will lack any choice that cannot be backed up by indisputable fact. He lacks hope, and hence wanders as a boat without an anchor or rudder. He will not invest in things that are worthwhile. He must believe they are sure things. He lacks love, and hence does not invest himself in things that are lovable. His manner will not show acceptance of others for who they are, but will be based solely upon what they have to offer him. When a Mason has passion and desire issues, otherwise known as emotional issues, he lacks awareness of his emotions and the emotions of others. He takes actions to dismiss or repress his emotions and that of others rather than deal with them effectively. His words and deeds reflect immaturity. When a Mason has morality issues, his values, standards, and boundaries are situational and politically governed and reflect multiple inconsistencies when compared. He has a double standard with multiple issues. Example, he demands from others what he refuses to give of himself. What gets in the way of both the instruction and the proofing of the entered apprentice work proficiency? Part of the problem is that most fellow craft Masons and above do not know about this work. They may not know how to state clearly and succinctly what a vice or superfluity is, how they are similar, and how they differ. When fellow craft Masons and above don't know these things, they are unable, because of their own awareness, to communicate this to candidates who need to work on them, or to be able to spot much needed work in these same candidates. The same goes for what virtues are, how they strengthen men, and how to go about integrating these virtues within men's daily habits. When Masons do the work, they know these things. They also realize how Masonry makes good men better. For one, properly prepared entered apprentice Masons are less inclined to judge inappropriately. They are more inclined to correct mistakes appropriately. They are also more likely to exhibit the qualities of a true brother rather than someone who merely holds the title but lacks the character such title should denote. Let's examine